just recently I have shifted my perspective from being a fixer to being an allower. And because I've been, and I am intuitive, I can look at a situation and I can tell you how to fix it.
I shifted in perspective on something. It's very controversial. I'm going to throw it out there because I thought about whether I should bring this, verbalize this on social media or not, but I'm going to.
Well, I would say probably over the last 3 years, about 2+ years ago, I was told to take a hiatus from reading from Spirit, and I did. And all the things that you asked me, I have been questioning, and my connection to God and spirituality, and how do I bring my work forward to make sure that the hand of God or God's influence is always present.
So as a theologian, it's tough to come to a shift, right? But I feel like I may be shifting on one particular issue, and that is that I used to think that God um, had a strict plan, and that God had a plan of where He wanted me to live. God had a plan of who He wanted me to marry, and God orchestrated all this stuff kind of behind the scenes, kind of like to a certain degree, like a puppet master, right? And in a good and beautiful way, right? And I still believe that in certain circumstances, but I've shifted in the sense that I now have come to believe through both living and through interpreting the scriptures that God may not um, particularly care. I'll tell you what God cares about. God cares um, that you are living your best life in connection with Him. That's what He cares about. He cares much less as to whether you live in Detroit or Philadelphia, or whether you marry Annabelle or Beth, right? Um, Maybe He does, but He cares less about those things. He cares less, whether you work at the bank or whether you work at the gravel pit. But what He wants for you is that you live a full and beautiful life in connection with Him. And for me, that's a major shift in my thinking that I've really been wrestling with lately.
I don't know if I would call it a shift in perspective, but I think it's an embodiment. I think that is a shift in perspective when we know something intellectually and then all of a sudden it becomes like the aha, where it's in your body. And that is how, when we release our attachment to things, they come in even more magically than we could ever imagine. It's only our or my, I'll speak from the my, it's only when I attach to something that I am separate from it. As soon as I am willing to completely surrender that and let it go, it's like the universe goes pow, and it's like, wow, the magic is beyond what I ever could have imagined.
More than has a perspective of mine changed, what I feel has happened over the last few years is that my perspective has solidified into what really is my message to the world. It's what we were just talking about to some degree. It's this idea that we are far wiser than we realize, myself included. Lots of things that I don't know. I like to say I know some things about some things, but there's some things I don't know anything about. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to not have all the answers. It's okay to enjoy being human. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to be right. It's okay to take a chance and try something new on and try something different. It's okay to tell somebody something you haven't told them before, and now's the time to say it. It's really about permission. It's about giving ourselves permission to be okay with who we are, and to recognize that we have the ability and the capacity to look after ourselves. And if we feel like we don't, then we have the capacity to ask somebody else to help us.
I think the biggest shift that I've found is many of the people I used to jokingly make fun of, which I'll call it out. I used to make fun of hippies a lot, growing up.
Yeah.
And I was an urban kid. I knew how to be a cowboy. I knew how to be an urban kid. I used to do like hip hop and kind of b-boy type dancing and stuff. But at the same time, I could ride horses. So I thought I was well-rounded. But there was this one group, and it was the hippies. Like I would jokingly call them like the tree huggers.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny. That's probably the most authentic group out there. Nobody's trying to be anything that they're not. And so I've really come to love all the different communities that you find on Earth. And that includes the urban group, that includes the metropolitan group, that includes the city folk, the cowboys and cowgirls, the Western folks. But the hippies, I love that culture of inclusion. And I love that they are not trying to be something that they're not. Yeah. And we all could take a lesson from them and kind of apply their rules and boundaries that they put on themselves. We could apply that to our own lives in just being a lot more inclusive and loving of all kinds of people, no matter what they look like, no matter how they talk, no matter what they dress like, just really loving all forms of life. And we don't need to necessarily go out there and do any drugs or anything, but I'm telling you that we can really connect to that love energy and inclusive energy just by opening ourselves up, kind of like the hippies did, Yeah.
6 months ago, I stopped eating sugar and I realized I was addicted to sugar. So I think, just a big awakening around what we put into ourselves and the temple that's our body, and how mindful and intentional we need to be with our eating.
I have become far more aware of the differences in light and dark and the power of prayer. It's one of these things, I mean, it's not like I've written over 100 prayers. I have a book published, Crossing Over Prayer book. What happens with prayer is it is an energy. All thought is energy. It's a physics concept. When you're sending prayer, when you're communicating with the higher realms on behalf of someone else, like all the people in Western North Carolina, I mean, there's just thousands of prayer hours going to them. It changes things. It changes people on the subtlest levels. The metaphysics of it can't see that prayer, but prayer travels with the speed of thought. It's faster than an email. It's faster than a text. It comes from your heart. And the more you're sending it, the higher your frequency connects you to the higher realms. That is a fabulous place to be. So if I could leave your listeners with that, when you pray, and Christ was once asked about that, he said, the prayer that comes from your heart that you create, and you can use the ones that I created, that'd be awesome. But in Christ's words, the prayer that you create from your heart, that you send to someone else with unconditional love, is the most powerful prayer, and anyone can do it. And really understanding that at a higher level, that's a major shift in dimensional thinking.
For a really long time, I felt like I wanted to change my relationship with money and my relationship with like being able to hold a certain frequency for more than just 5 hours or a day or whatever, because sometimes we're working our way up the ladder in terms of holding frequency and holding a new version of ourselves. We then slip back automatically because that's what feels really comfortable. And I feel like lately I've really had a huge breakthrough by practicing Kundalini. And I'm doing a 40-day practice right now where it has shifted my perspective in the way that I hold myself and the way that I see certain practices like Kundalini, because they said it was going to be Kundalini yoga, and I was like, oh, I don't do well with yoga, and I was totally resistant to the process, but then I was open to it, and it really has fortified my aura, and it has fortified my electromagnetic field, and it's just totally shifted a lot within me.
So yeah, one of the thing that I just recently experienced, I was in Sedona, and I went there for a retreat because I've recently finished my quantum hypnosis certificate under Dolores Cannon, and it was a networking, so I wanted to go and check it out, and I really loved all the people I met. And it was interesting because I went there with a certain mindset and certain goal, and during my experience, I was shown something that was a little different than what I thought it needed to be, right? I mean, if you go somewhere, especially when you travel, you spend your money, you spend your energy, you spend your time, you take off from work, you truly are vested, and you go with a certain intention in mind, because I do everything with intention and goal. And I learned a lot of different lessons while I was there for 5 days, like really major lessons. And then I also learned that whatever I thought I was going there for, it ended up becoming shifted in a good way. And I have been already seeing that pattern every time when I go. I always learn something, and I say travel is to unravel. And it was very interesting that I learned that. And then I realized that that's pretty much what it's all about, is that you are going to create a projection that you think you are going to meet with based on all the actions you're going to take. But when you meet with that projection and when you're interacting with it, right there, you're going to actually learn something about yourself that you didn't know because you had not done that interaction before. And that is where evolution is. That's where the growth is. And that's where shifting dimension is. And I did that during my recent travel, and it was fun.
The more that I do this, the deeper I feel the love. The more often I feel my heart opening, the more often I feel at peace. And I often think about raising the vibration. In 2012, it was the end of the Mayan calendar, and there was a lot about the shift from sacred masculine to sacred feminine, and I had been working towards that for several years of, oh, we've got to raise the vibration and bring in love, and because everything's going to change in 2012. Well, it probably did, but it felt the same the next day. December 12, 2012, December 13th was like, huh, okay. But what I feel now compared to the way I felt then is, I more and more often I fall into, which I truly love, let's see where the day takes us. How can I be of service today? And I talk to my guides way more often than I did then. We are not alone. We are surrounded by helpers, those that want to help us to bring in this light into this higher dimension, into higher consciousness. And so it's really, I don't have to work so hard at getting there. I just have to be there. Just feel it. To just feel heaven on earth.
Just recently, I have shifted my perspective from being a fixer to being an allower. And because I've been, and I am intuitive, I can look at a situation and I can tell you how to fix it. And if I really love you and I really care about you, I want to fix it for you. And I have come to the shift within myself in the last 2 or 3 months that I need to let that go and allow others to fix their own lives, because otherwise they can't own it and they'll lose their power. And I don't want to take anybody's power.
I'm kind of realizing how much work this is for me to do what I do, how like draining it is. It is also fulfilling because I think that I'm taking in life, and I'm using it to propel me, but I'm also really tired. I'm really tired, and I forget that there's some days where I want to put down being a psychic medium, and it's not always an option, where I just want to be in my human bones and my human skin, and I want to cry and I want to be really sad and really angry, and I just want to be that. But I also know that I am an educator and I'm a teacher and I am a guide and I'm a life giver as well. And so having to balance that has been kind of a challenge for me, but it's also like made this a lot more gratifying too. So that's where I'm at. That's my perspective shift right now.
My perspective is that we're entering perhaps a higher spiritual time. And the more a person can move forward at their own pace, there's nobody gonna, say, I'm watching you. Do it at your own pace. And begin in the simplest way by building a relationship with God. I mean, it's about the easiest way to begin your spiritual path. And when you're always connected to the divine, there's a light that goes on inside of you. And wink, wink, that light goes on inside every cell in your body. Oh my gosh, when every cell in your body is filled with light, guess what's not there? The darkness of illness or depression or disease.
I shifted in perspective on something. It's very controversial. I'm going to throw it out there because I thought about whether I should bring this, verbalize this on social media or not, but I'm going to. Came up again in my walk this morning. I've noticed that there's this expression as people pray, the prayer warriors, they say, they call or they plead for the blood of Jesus. Cover this situation in the blood of Jesus for resolution. And it suddenly hit me recently that 20 years ago, I never heard that terminology. And I'm hearing it every single day. And I'm also seeing that we are being covered with the blood of our young men and our children. And I wondered to myself if that particular terminology wasn't inserted into our religious narrative because our throat chakra is so powerful, especially as people of color, that we are actually promoting more bloodshed in our people. That is a paradigm shift that hit me very recently. It's going to be controversial, but I know that 20 years ago, I never heard that expression.
Well, I would say probably over the last 3 years, about 2+ years ago, I was told to take a hiatus from reading from spirit, and I did. And all the things that you asked me, I have been questioning, and my connection to God and spirituality, and how do I bring my work forward to make sure that the hand of God or God's influence is always present, so that it's presented to anybody that I sit with, work with, read with, mentor, or teach, that they benefit from, but they know that where I'm being fed from is that one source of light that feeds every single religion. So you could have every religion around a beautiful fountain, calling upon or worshiping God and their own ideal. But if you looked up, there was one source, one stream of light, and that stream of light separated and fed every single religious faction from one source of light. And so how, I've questioned lately, like you bringing up, like people are like, oh, well, you can't, it's the devil's work and it's this and that. And so I just think there's a big shifting in the dimension and in the way people are thinking and feeling, because the world has changed so much, and the things that we're being fed are really bringing people back to their oneness and questioning, am I doing the work that I'm supposed to be doing, and am I honoring God in the work? And that's been my biggest shift over the last 2 years, and the most important thing that I want to carry forward through the rest of my lifetime.
I had an absolutely enormous shift actually this past weekend. So my dad came to visit me, and my dad is in his 80s. And I grew up super Catholic. My dad was super Catholic, and we went to church almost every day. And he was hard on me. I was the oldest. He was super hard on me. And I have 4 younger sisters. And it was just a tough time for me. I had to take care of my sisters. I had to be a good Catholic girl. And for a long time, for decades even, my dad and I didn't have a good relationship. I was angry about the past and angry about the things that he said to me when I was a kid and how he treated me. And my dad came to visit this past weekend, and it was absolutely beautiful. I'm a beekeeper at home. I have got 3 beehives in my backyard. And I had my dad suit up in a beekeeper suit, and he went into the hives with me, and we watched all these bees, which are kind of like alien creatures, right? They're so different than humans, running around the hive, and they're all women, which is also really interesting. My dad always wanted a boy and had 5 girls. And so all the bees were working so hard in the hive, tending to the queen. And my dad, he had a breakdown. It was beautiful. He had this amazing experience watching how I cared for these little creatures that are pollinating our beautiful planet and helping us grow food to eat. And my dad understood me in that moment. We had a long, beautiful conversation after we closed the hives and took off our equipment. It was glorious. So my dad and I got closer this weekend. So it was a huge shift in
I'm
perspective for both me and my dad.
I always try to change perspectives when I can. Perspective is so important. You can't get so locked in on something that you're not willing to bend out of it. I'm a huge believer in dualism, if you know what that is, which is you can't really appreciate one thing without the other, which is, hot. You can't, how do you know what hot is without cold, pain without pleasure, light without darkness, and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of this world is based off of it. And if you don't have perspective, you get locked into one. And in the media world, I run into, I've noticed that people that when you grow up, there's something called a hero's journey when it comes to the plot, which is there's got to be hills and valleys. Otherwise, how do you really appreciate the end? And so when people think they're down, about certain, it's like, oh, why has this happened to me? It's like, look, if it didn't happen to you, right? What would you have really gained in the process?
As much as I'm still sad for people who lose loved ones, I'm also a little bit, I guess, maybe jealous that they're going on this journey ahead. And I take comfort in that. So I think that's part of, I think the shifting for me. I still get sad. I still get a little upset. Why them? Why now? But that's not our call. And if they're taking them, they have a mission and they're out of pain and they're going to a phenomenal place and journey, then Godspeed to them. And one day I really do hope to meet back up with them. So it may not be a huge shift, but it was enough of a shift for me to take me from the pain side to a little bit more the hopeful and peaceful side.
I'm in a season now of understanding the spirit realm like never before. I'm starting to realize that more and more people are experiencing, and I know it's increasing too, not just I think it's increasing, I know that spiritual activity is increasing. I know that people are seeing lights in the sky, orbs. They're seeing shadow people. Like I see these people, but they're not physical. They're experiencing UFOs. They're experiencing this may sound funny, some Bigfoot, like at a higher level. And people also are experiencing Bigfoot, and at the same time, they're experiencing these spiritual things that are happening around this encounter with a Bigfoot, a Sasquatch, right? There's something spiritual there. If you mention these things, people will go, you are a nutcase. And so I'm finding people don't want to even talk about these things because of fear of being ostracized by their friends. Maybe their pastor. If they said this to their pastor or their spiritual leader, whoever, they're gonna think, what are you? You're a nutcase. You're crazy. So what's this shifting thing in my life? I'm finding Christians and non-Christians, believers and unbelievers, we're just experiencing these things out there right now. And so we are in a new age. We're in a new season.